Hello YouTube. In this video we're going to continue on with this drawing of my wife and I, and I'm going to narrate along the way, bring out some points as I can. I'm also going to be speeding up some parts because this is one very long video. So let's get to it. Okay, I've got my camera set at kind of an angle because recently when I was doing these videos, the camera's kind of in my face and it's very difficult for me to draw, so I had to move it over to the side, but I think you could be able to see what I'm doing. Now, I'm using a 2H pencil here, which is usually the lightest pencil I will use because I'm now putting in some base graphite, a very light tone, for my very white shirt. And the only thing that should be the white of the paper would be like the gleam in your eye, the sparkle off your teeth, some highlights off of maybe your nose, or things like that where light really hits it, and the sparkle in jewelry, whatever the case may be. But things like a shirt should not be just left white as the paper unless you've got a shirt on that kind of reflects light. There might be some spots where you might have a really bright highlight. So I'm going to add some kind of tone to my white shirt. And so that's like with anything else, like for example the white of your eyes. You'll notice that the white of the eyes is not really white, and so you can see where there's tone in our eyes. The teeth, even those who bleach them like crazy, is not going to, well, some people I've seen have some pretty white teeth, but you're not going to want to have their teeth the white of the paper. You want to save that for the gleam off the teeth, the sparkle, that kind of thing. So everything around that sparkle will have to be toned down a little bit. So I'm doing this right here with my white shirt because my shirt is white, but it's not going to be paper white. It will in some areas be very close, as I will be taking some graphite off as I go into the more details of drawing the shirt. I will take some graphite off where the fabric kind of folds upwards towards the light and gets lighter and lighter. That's where I will take graphite off. So right now I'm just basically working on putting a little bit of tone on the shirt. Now I'm taking off the grid marks here with a pen eraser because since the shirt is a white shirt and overall I'm going to be blending it really light because it's a white shirt, the grid lines are likely not going to be hit by the graphite I lay down. So I want to get those off my shirt really quick here before I proceed with adding more graphite with my 2H pencil. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up because it can get a little monotonous watching me put tone in a white. Now here I'm just putting on some gloves so that I don't smear my hand on the drawing. I decided to go this route instead of using a little paper card underneath my hand, and then I decided to cut the fingers off because it gets a little warm in plastic. I'm not sure I'll continue using this approach to keeping my hands off the paper, but I thought I'd give it a shot at this time. Okay, now I'm going to start blending in what I've already laid down with the 2H pencil. And this is pretty much standard practice that you've probably noticed if you've watched any of my other drawing tutorials. is that I lay down graphite and then I blend. I lay down graphite and then I blend. And it's pretty much the routine. What does change, however, is the kind of blender I will use. You'll see me use 4 different kinds of blenders in this particular video. Right now I'm using a cotton swab. I'll also be using this little foam pad. Comes on like on a paintbrush handle, and I'll also be using a paper blender, a tightly wound paper blender, and then I'll also be using a tortillon. So keep your eyes open for that. Here I'm just going to go ahead and just do some blending. I'm going to speed this part up. Okay, I'm going to add a little more graphite now using the 2H on the back of my neck here for the white part that shows just above the jacket. And what I'm noticing is that the tone I'm putting down for the white shirt is really close to the tone of my face, which in reality my face is not the color of a white shirt. So I just kind of pointed it out for your sake, that I'm going to have to either lighten up that shirt, or I'm going to have to darken that area around my face and the areas around it to make sure that there is a difference between the two, because it's certainly not the same. So I'm going to take my kneaded eraser here and kind of stretch it so that it get a clean spot. You have to do that often with these kneaded erasers. So what I've done is, I've opted to lighten the shirt up, which, because that makes more sense. The shirt is white and I've got it a little on the darker side, so I'm going to go ahead and just start lighting that up right now, more in the center of the shirt rather than the edges of the shirt, because as it folds down behind my neck or folds down underneath the jacket, it will be darker because the light doesn't hit it there. So I'm focusing on just lifting off the graphite down the center of that shirt alone. You can see that that's left a dark, somewhat of a dark shaded area between the jacket and the shirt. Now I'm using one of my black pencils here that does really dark, really writes dark. It's kind of a crayonish type of thing, like a color pencil. But I want to sharpen the edges and really darken right there where the shirt goes behind my neck, because it's really dark there. There's no light in that area, and I just want to refine the edges. So I'm going to do that there and anywhere else that it's needed. And here you see I'm going to tighten up the edges of the shirt, between the shirt and the dark area, which is part of it's my wife's hair and part of it is just the gap between both of us there. I want to get that nice and clean. Also behind the shirt next to my neck, I want to get that really well defined. It just makes it pop better when you do that. And here's where I'm starting to now lighten up areas of the shirt because the shirt is clearly too dark. But since the shirt is not flat, but it's crinkled up in various areas, you see my collar is, you know, popped up there, and or you can see the inside of my collar there, the different tones of shadow and light. So putting the tone down as I did initially and then taking it off with the eraser. Obviously I'm not going to be able to get it all off anyway, so it's not going to be back to what the paper color is. And a little bit of this tones here and there throughout my shirt will give the shirt a little more of a non-flat look, that it has a little bit of crinkle to it. And I'll continue to refine this as this video goes on. Okay, and I'm going to take my carbon sketch pencil because it's the darkest that I have, and I want to work in this little area right here that is really dark. If you look at my reference photo to the left, you'll see that it's very dark in that area. So I want to get that put in, and then as my wife's arm starts to show up out into the light, I'm going to use another very dark pencil that I will blend out so that her arm shows through. But I wanted the dark carbon for that very, very dark area there. And it's kind of a messy thing. It leaves a lot of powder, so I use my horse brush to brush that off. So I'm going to use the General's 9XXB, which is a dark pencil. It's not as dark as that carbon, so you will be able to see a demarcation or a difference in the darkness between where I did the carbon and the area which is my wife's arm. Now, I want to point out that when I'm looking at the reference here in my studio, you might say, it is actually darker than what you see on the reference, because this reference here, of course, is nice and bright. It's not a printed picture, it's the actual file itself. So it's well lit and everything, but when I print it out and, you know, under the lighting of my room here, my office, that it's actually darker. So you'll see that I'll be shading this area here that you see I'm going with. It's going to be a little bit darker than what you see in the reference, and it's for that very reason, because I'm not using a screen version of my reference. I'm using an actual printed reference to just plain copy paper. So it is a little muted than what you see here. Here you can see the shirt's super white and bright, where it's not on my reference photo. And so just wanted to make sure you understood that I'm looking at something that's a little more muted than what you're seeing here. It's the same picture, it's just the one I'm drawing from is actually printed, and it's under not such bright lights as it is on a computer monitor here. Now here's where I'm pulling out the paper blender. So that's the other blender I'm using, and I'm kind of blending in from the real dark area out into the lighter area. And then I'm also using it to lay down some tone for the arm. Now notice that I'm going from the dark area and out into the light area with that blender. And I'm doing this just so I can have this smooth gradation from dark to light. It should be a gradual thing. And so if you see I'm using 9xxb here, it's that I need to lay down a little more darkness just beyond where the jacket meets my wife's arm there. You can see is the darkest tone, and then it starts to get lighter as you get out more to the left there. So I needed to get some more of this dark material here from the 9xxb. And I'm looking at this reference and trying to make sure I'm getting the shape right. Where is this actual shadow located on the reference, and lay down some 9xxb there. And then from there I will blend out again out into the lighter areas. I'll be actually using the graphite that I take from the darker area to tone the lighter area. Rather than using a light pencil, I'll use the blender to actually do all the work for me. And it makes for a much gradual progression from dark to light. As you can see here, I'm going from the dark area into the light, using the material from the dark area to, put material on the actual paper blender so that I can draw the flesh tone for her arm. Okay, now that I've added some more darker area here by my jacket, that side of her arm, I'm now taking the sponge blender that I have here that's on kind of a paint stick here. I believe it's called a soft with 2 T's. And I'm using that as my blender. You can see it works really well. I'm getting that skin tone all drawn in. It's a handy little blender to have. I'm going to try to get as even a tone as I can on her arm, and then I'll go back to darkening certain areas and lightening others. Okay, now I want to kind of put some small little light marks all over her arm here in various areas, because it's not just going to be one tone. Very few people have one tone skin. So I'm kind of using one of those little electric hand erasers. I think this one might be like a Derwent or something. And as I put these little dots on here and little marks and whatever with the eraser, I will go in and tone that down. I just want to get them in there first, and then I'm going to blend it down so that you could just barely, you can see a tone difference between those areas and the surrounding areas, because there's not predominant light marks on her arm, as you can see in the reference, but you can see lighter area and darker areas at the very detail level. If you just look really, really close, you try to look at all the detail in the reference that you're driving, depending on how realistic you want to get your drawing. So you can see here I'm really toning it down so that it's just hardly, you can hardly see it, but I want to have some kind of differences in the arm. Now you can see how much more realistic that looks. And again, remember that the reference you're looking at is going to be a lot brighter because it's on a computer monitor, as opposed to what I'm seeing on the printed page. But her arm is looking more and more like skin rather than just a drawing. I want to make it as realistic as possible. So you can see I'm still toning it down, but if you really look close on my drawing there, you can see just barely some minor differences, a little bit of lightness here, a little bit of darkness there. I'll even put some even dark spots on there, just ever so lightly, because that's more realistic, and that's more in line with what I am looking at on my reference photo. Now in the reference I can see light strands of hair that are going over her arm, and there's also some on her neck, and I thought I'd go ahead while I was working on the arm to go ahead and put the loose hairs on her skin. Many of that will get blended in and I'll have to redo it again later, but at least it just kind of gets some of that foundation put in there and allows me to get some of it over the arm, which it will show, and I won't be blending that in. So I just wanted to make sure that that part gets in there. As you can see in the reference, you can just see these light strands of hair. You want to catch all the details, and all these little details catch the eye when somebody is viewing your drawing, and it really gives a much better impression if you catch all the little things as well as the things that are really obvious and stand out. Now with this HB pencil, I'm just going to start putting in some of the subtle lines for the folds and everything on my shirt. Kind of give me an idea of where all the folds are located. I'm visually measuring, just kind of eyeballing it actually. You know, the little darker lines that are within the shirt, where the separation of shading. You look on the reference there on the left compared to what I'm drawing, you can see I'm drawing that demarcation point there ever so lightly, just to give me an idea of just about where that's located at. And then the fold itself, I'm going to start marking that down, and anywhere that I see a fold, I want to mark it. That gives me a guide as to where I need to go in and start doing my shading and making it look like fabric folds. And you want to check out my video on how to draw fabric folds. I'll put a link down below. Okay, I'm using my kneaded eraser to clean the graphite off the tip of my paper blender here, because I'm going to start now blending these marker lines that I made for the folds of my collar, and start making the shirt look more like it's got these little folds in them. And the paper blender is really good for that. Though I have a very blunt end on this paper blender, and so I'm going to end up switching to a tortillon, which has a finer point. And so, yep, that's where I kind of realized I need a sharper point here, and I'm going to start looking for where is my tortillon. I found it. There it is. And I'm going to clean the tip of that as well. And then I'm going to start working on these subtle changes of folds, as you can see in the reference, all the shading and everything. A lot of it will be done with this tortillon. I'll draw with it. As long as there's graphite available, I'll shade and do the rolling fabric type deal with it. Again, I refer to you to my video on drawing folds. Description, or the link will be down below. now I'm going to try to figure out the shade I'm going to need for this jacket here. And I grabbed this 6B pencil, and I'm just going to kind of get the initial outline of where the different parts of the jacket folds are, and get those kind of darken in a little bit, so that when I start to shade the whole jacket and start putting the pattern on there, that I won't lose my reference as to where the folds are on that jacket. So I'm going to be using this pencil here for that. But as I was using it in shading and everything, and I'm going to speed up this process here in a moment, I realized that I'm going to really want to get a little darker with the jacket, so I'm going to go with, perhaps like a 9B pencil, 8B or 9B, a little bit darker than what I got going here, and then I'm going to start putting the pattern in, but not in this video. That will be the next one. So I'm going to go ahead for the rest of this video now and just speed it up to the very end. And I want to thank you for watching this video. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. And that way you'll be notified when the next part of this video comes out. And I'll see you then. Bye.